and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, some businesses are criticising the government's new point-based immigration system. Those wanting to get a visa will need qualifications and the ability to speak English. The Home Secretary says it's time for businesses to start training British workers. But Rassan Al-Sous, the founder of Yorkshire Dama Cheese in West Yorkshire, has told LBC she doesn't think the system is fair.
Whom are you expecting to do the cheese, filling the petrol, working at supermarkets? The whole society are built by different skills. Not always only doctors or engineers are the people who can build a country.
British passengers flown home later this week from the coronavirus-hit cruise ship in Japan will have to spend more time in isolation when they arrive. They'll spend 14 days at the Arrow Park NHS site on the Wirral. Separately, 3 police officers are self-isolating over fears they could have caught the virus from a woman arrested in Staffordshire. The first hearing into Caroline Flack's death has been held. An inquest has been opened and adjourned and heard that the TV presenter was found at her flat in East London and the officers and paramedics tried to save her. LBC's correspondent Rachel Venables has more.
We heard details of what happened on Saturday, including the fact that passing police officers were flagged down on Northwold Road in Stoke Newington and brought to the TV presenter. They and then paramedics tried to give her CPR, but they were unsuccessful and she was pronounced dead at just after 2:30 in the afternoon. The case has been adjourned now until early August.
Flood-hit areas across England and Wales are bracing themselves for more heavy rain. The Met Office has issued yellow weather warnings for the next 4 days. There are concerns flood barriers on the River Severn in Worcestershire could still break. James is the owner of the Merchant's Fish and Chip Shop in the town.
It is weird because obviously where we're stood now, the water is it's above us, it's head height kind of thing, so if the barriers weren't there it would probably be up to our waist now where we are. But they said it was going to may come over. They said our side should be okay, but the risk was there. They didn't want to say yeah you'll be fine when they might not.
A single bottle of rare whiskey has sold for a record £825,000. The largest private whiskey collection in the world has been auctioned online, with the first half making more than £3.2 million. The LBC Markets report the FTSE 100 has closed up 75 points at 74.57. The pound buys $1.29 and €1.20. LBC weather, heavier rain working its way from the north of England into Wales, the Midlands and further south tonight. Wintry showers and colder for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a low of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Caroline Rundell.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening to you. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Cross Question, LBC's political panel debate show. If you'd like to watch us, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. I've just remembered to look into the camera. And on the LBC Facebook page and Twitter feed. 0345 6060 973 is a number to call if you'd like to put a question to our panellists. Let me introduce them to you. A favourite on Cross Question, Dr. David Starkey, returns to much acclamation on Twitter today, it has to be said. So David Lidington, newly released from the House of Commons, he's here as well. I think for the first time, David, isn't it?
First time on this show with you, yeah.
And Vicky Foxcroft, also for the first time, Labour MP for Lewisham Deptford. And Dreda Say Mitchell, the crime writer, returns. She's got a new book out called Trap Door: Is the Dark Past About to Surface? Always a good question to politicians, I find,
It's in
Dreda.
the top 100 of bestsellers on American Kindle at the moment.
Well, let's get it on the British Kindle as well. So your questions will come to them in just a second.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Well, welcome to you all. Let's go to our first question. It's Charlotte, who's in the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire. Hello, Charlotte.
Oh, good evening, Iain.
Evening.
It's nice to speak to you.
And you.
I have a question for the panel. I am living in one of the areas that suffered the flooding on Sunday, and I was bailing out to try and stop my house from flooding. And I was wondering what the panel thought of the government's reaction to what has happened this week, especially for people like me in very rural towns and areas, and if they feel should the government do better, or should we have a national sort of flood defence policy that actually works, because I don't feel that it has, especially here.
Before I go to them, we all want to know, were you successful in keeping the waters at bay?
Yes, but it did come into my garage, but it wasn't anything tragic, and I think I'm very blessed compared to some of my neighbours.
Well, indeed. David Lidington, you've been in government when there have been floods before. It's obviously impossible to stop any form of flooding, but this does seem to be happening regularly in the same areas.
It's happening in more than the predictable areas. I mean, even this last weekend, I picked up, listening to various of the meteorological experts, that we've had about 3 years now of very wet weather, which has affected different parts of the country, sometimes the Lake District, sometimes Yorkshire, sometimes the Severn, as it has particularly badly at the moment. I think what the government needs is obviously to get help quickly and efficiently to those people who need it now. That's got to be largely through local services and local authorities in the first place. But then if people need extra financial support, local authorities need financial support, someone at the top needs to cut through the red tape, make sure it's given. Longer term, I mean, what really worries me is the number of new houses that are still being built or scheduled to be built upon floodplains.
But we've been saying this for 15 years.
Yeah, I know, and I think with the number of extreme weather events, as they're called, that we're getting now, what the impact that climate change is having, the relevant departments need to do some very rapid, hard thinking about changing planning and housing guidelines, because it does seem to be, if you're going to end up just building more houses in areas that are likely to flood, and where people can find it really difficult to get affordable insurance, then there's something wrong with that policy. I think there is the need for a rethink there.
There's a hashtag on Twitter at the moment called hashtag Where's Boris? Shouldn't the Prime Minister be leading from the front here, visiting some of these areas, at least showing some empathy? And we haven't seen him for days.
Well, I don't know what else he's doing at the moment, but I'm sure that he will be sort of feeling for those people. But there's a balance always to be struck, because you go out as a Prime Minister to visit an area, and the risk is that all the operational work slows down because they're looking after the Prime Minister and meeting and greeting him and showing him round. And I think the most important thing is you get practical results to people rather than just being seen to parade in front of the cameras. If you parade in front of the cameras, he'd be getting flack for that.
Back in 2007, when Gordon Brown had first become Prime Minister, and there was floods, I think it was July that year, and David Cameron got a lot of flack as leader of the opposition for heading off to Rwanda.
Yep.
And Gordon Brown really gripped the crisis and was seen as a man of action. That's not happening with the current Prime Minister, is it? OK, David Starkey, go on, elaborate.
Well, I mean, look, Gordon Brown's marvellous grasp of politics, which continued for the whole duration of his premiership.
Well, no, he did very well on that particular issue.
But it just shows the ease of that sort of demonstration. I think the questioner is asking much more sensible, dare I say, questions than you are.
This is why I invite him back. This is what you have to do to be invited back. Insult me.
I'll have to remember that.
The first thing is to go to David's point on the floodplain. Lots of countries like Holland build on floodplains, but they build particular kinds of houses. Right. They build houses with garages and utility rooms and the living accommodation on the first floor and the second floor. Yeah. That makes complete sense. Right. So we need not simply an altered planning policy, we need an altered architectural policy. The second thing is, there is a tremendous problem now with the body that is responsible for taking care of the environment, which has been taken over by environmentalists. And there is this sweet notion, we heard it from George Eustace, the Secretary of State, that we want more beavers, we want more woodland, we want more natural measures. Well, I'm sorry, most river courses in Britain are not natural. They have been repeatedly dredged, widened, embanked. They're artificial spaces, and they need proper science. The Times had an excellent thing today on the fact that there are new devices for the which are sort of, and it sounds very funny, perforated dams. What's the point of a dam with a hole in it? It slows down the descent of water. All of these areas are low-lying areas, low down on the course of the river. The water builds up in the highlands and then rushes down towards them and puddles. And what you need to do, ideally, is to stop it flowing so quickly. And there are proven scientific means of doing this. But the trouble is, once you become sentimental about the environment, you stop thinking. You stop using evidence.
Isn't also part of the problem is that EU directives over the years have actually prevented us dredging our rivers
for precisely the same reasons. I mean, that is the other. But I think, under particularly its previous leadership, the body responsible took this sentimentalised. This is why I got cross with you about the Prime Minister.
No need to
explain
yourself.
Well, I occasionally do, Dave. Sorry, Iain, you taught me the last time I was on this programme a degree of good manners.
Did I?
And
I feel
it didn't last very long.
I feel I've achieved something in my life.
It didn't last very long. But I do think there's a real danger of sentimentality. What we need is not sentiment, isn't sharing of feelings, it's doing something.
We need less sentiment and less sediment.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in straight away.
Go on.
Can you imagine if you've had your house, you've had a flood in your house, and from what I've seen of floods, I've been learning quite a lot. It's not just flooding from outside. The flood comes up through the floor.
Disgusting.
And the idea
from the loo.
The idea, exactly. The idea that you will stand there, I can't have any emotion. This is emotional. We invest so much in our homes. It's one of the biggest things in our lives. So for me, one of the things I would be expecting is to see the Prime Minister somewhere, to see the leader of the country in an area actually adds to people's confidence, it adds to people's morales. I mean, one of the areas that I love in Britain is Hebden Bridge. And it breaks my heart every time I see Hebden Bridge go underwater. And I remember I've got lots of family who live in Sheffield. And I can't remember when it was, about 10 years ago. And actually it was not that long ago as well, near Meadow Bank. Yeah. There was flooding and everyone was just, what is happening here? So I think the first thing to grasp is this the new norm? If this is the new norm, this type of flooding, how is the government going to respond financially? If you want to have action, David, you talked about working with local authorities and cutting through the red tape. The reality is the government have, over the last 10 years, really whittled down the power of local authority, really whittled down their resources. So action to me has to be followed through with money. And yes, we want to see the Prime Minister there, please.
OK. Vicky Foxcroft.
I think actually following on from that, what we also need to see is what kind of action the government are doing. Should there be a COBRA meeting? Because this is a national emergency. And actually, Boris shouldn't be afraid of going and speaking to people, because actually when you speak to people and you have those conversations, you hear directly from them what it is that you need to be doing as Prime Minister. And I think we need to see more action on this. And last time when Liz Truss was the floodings minister, she went and said, don't worry, we've got plans in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But we've obviously not got plans in place, and we need to make sure that we have got future plans for people who are having an absolutely horrific time.
Part of the problem is that you can't just build flood defences in 6 months. It does take quite a long time to do. And I think one of the areas I saw on the television, the flood defences were half complete, but obviously not fully complete. So the same thing has happened again. And do you not think, though, that this is one of those areas where the government could literally spend £100 billion and still not solve the problem?
Well, I mean, the government aren't doing that at the moment, so that's kind of speculation. I think the government do need to be investing in this and making sure that they're listening and responding to people's concerns. But also, where is the stuff in terms of helping people? I saw something where it's like 500 quid for each house that's affected. That's not proper financial help.
But you're supposed to have insurance. You see, again...
But some people can't get it, David.
I know, and clearly, but then that raises another question. If you have people continuing to live in areas which are uninsurable, shouldn't we be moving them out? In other words, we are going to need much more... I'm sorry, this is painful. I was brought up in a town in the far north, which is exactly as you described, Kendal. And in my youth, the walk that I had to school every single winter was 6 feet underwater in patches because the River Kent just rose. And then there were terribly radical measures taken, which are hideous. You to scrape this what had been a beautiful river in a historic town, but the decision was taken. But we are going to have to take very radical measures, because what is striking in the recent flooding is historic places have flooded. This is, in other words, not new builds, not on floodplains. Right. This is unusual because, I mean, if you look at Tewkesbury, right, one of the places on the Severn that was affected, there are the famous photographs, and they show the old abbey, now the magnificent church, completely dry, because of course they built on the little bit of high ground. But what is amazing is old houses are being flooded. In other words, rivers that were once controllable are ceasing to be so. This requires, requires more than sentiment, though sentiment is important. But incidentally, can I say, I thought we employed the royal family to go and do the smooch.
They're declining in numbers at the moment.
They are declining in numbers.
They are driving them out.
They are declining in numbers. Well, either
we might have a question.
I thought they were opting out, but maybe they got bored of visiting flooded areas.
Let's move on. Just before we do, though, Charlotte, just a quick reaction from you.
I just wanted to say I was very interested in what the panel had to say. I do agree with what David Lidington was saying. They are building houses around here like Billio. I've got 200 going up opposite me, and they're continuously building all the time, and they're taking away the natural drainage and of course the roots of the trees that can actually absorb some of this water, and they're building a load of concrete over the top. And I think something has to be done about the actual criminal planning application process that is happening within local government and councils.
All right, Charlotte, I'm going to have to leave it.
Starkey had some points as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We need to move on. Just a little bit of, I think it's interesting news. Vicky, who are you supporting in the Labour leadership?
Lisa and Andy.
Bad luck. Paddy Power have started paying out early on bets that Keir Starmer will be the next Labour leader. So there we are. Right, let's go to Jason in Grays in Essex. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Ian.
Hello.
Good afternoon, panel. Good evening. My question relates to a piece you did about half an hour ago, actually. You asked sort of what has changed from the EU's perspective in terms of a Canada-style trade deal that used to be on the table but now isn't. In October last year, Boris Johnson did that wonderful deal, so he told us, with the European Union. He signed up an international agreement that commits us to the principles of the European Convention on Human Rights. He commits us to a level playing field with the European Union in terms of rules, regulations and standards in our future trading relationship as part of the political declaration. Today or this week, he's been changing the story and saying we're not having a level playing field, we're changing the rules. Does anybody on the panel think they can convince anybody that this government is taking these future discussions about our future relationship with the European Union seriously? Because they're just playing games at the moment.
OK, Vicky Foxcroft.
I'm really concerned, and I'm concerned actually around the immigration announcements that were done today. And
we might come on to that a bit later.
That will have, I don't have faith in terms of Boris Johnson negotiating stuff, but I do think that we need to be holding the government to account as much as possible to make sure that workers' rights are protected, that environmental protections are in place, and that we have a close relationship with Europe. But at the moment, the stuff that I'm hearing feels quite worrying, particularly in terms of making sure that we have that good relationship.
What do you say to the argument that in many of these areas, Britain has actually higher standards than European law? Why this assumption that there would be a race to the bottom?
Well, on workers' rights, I don't think that we've seen from the Conservatives that they particularly want to protect them in terms of...
What about the minimum wage, which is being sent up in a fashion that Labour would have regarded as dangerous?
Well, we would have had the living wage, the actual proper living wage.
But what about the fact that the EU offered a Canada-style free trade deal in 2017, and yet now they seem to think that that isn't a good idea?
I mean, I don't know in terms of all of the details of what was definitely on the table in terms of negotiations, but I think the point is now, is where is that relationship in terms of negotiating stuff, and why all we're hearing about in terms of, you know, discussions and stuff that's gone on afterwards is a breakdown in that. And we really need to go and build that good, strong relationship with our friends in Europe.
And they need to build one with us, it would seem, because if at one stage they've been offering that and now they're not offering that, that just doesn't sound like they want to continue. It just, you know, for somebody like me who's not involved in politics, I'm a writer, and I pop up every now and again to have my say.
Have an emote.
Yes, exactly. Have some emotion. Yes. It just feels like a lot of politicians playing games with all of our lives. So it's not just the government. I feel like Europe is playing games as well.
Isn't it just called negotiation, Dreda?
Maybe it is, David.
I mean, when his lot were in charge,
maybe it is.
The previous, you negotiated terribly.
Maybe it is.
Sorry, I'm being very rude. I haven't learned my good manners.
Yes, maybe it is. But you know what? When you're an ordinary person on the street, and remember, we've been through years of this. We've had our vote, and we've been put through the ringer. What we want are adults who actually sit down at the table. We know it's going to take a while. We're in a transition period. But come on, let's put our heads together to get the best for this country and the best for Europe. And talking about workers' rights, I always kind of wince when I hear Europe, you know, without Europe, we won't have workers' rights. Do you know what? In this country, and, you know, I'm a member of the Labour Party, the Labour movement, think about the kind of strikes we had in the 1920s, the general strike. My partner, his granddad was a shop steward during the general strike. And the idea that you're talking about working class people having to wait for Europe to get workers' rights. We've got a great tradition in this country of workers' rights. I think the big question is, are the government actually going to uphold that tradition?
And you voted to leave.
I did.
Are you confident that you made the right decision and that it will all turn out right in the end?
I'm confident I made the right decision. With politicians involved, who knows what will happen? But we are on a road. We should have been on a road a long time ago because the people voted and it was time to move on. And I'm pleased we've moved on.
Who would have thought you'd had so much in common with David Starkey?
I know, exactly.
David Lidington, you were in the cabinet in 2017 when this offer of a Canada-style free trade agreement was made. Why do you think that the EU seem to have shifted their position, or have they?
I think there's less of a shift than you think. I think if you had Michel Barnier sitting around the table, he would say that the qualifications of the small print were always there. But I think what David Starkey interjected a moment ago was the key point. This is a negotiation. It's the start of a negotiation. And there's going to be quite a lot of chest beating from both sides at this point. When you start to look behind that, it seems to be, if you look at the Brussels side, what they worry about is that the UK outside the EU will in some way get an unfair advantage over them, that what they will call dumping by having lower standards on environmental workers' rights. I think the reality is that no British government, including this one, is going to be able to survive if they try to reduce workers' rights, or let alone reduce animal welfare standards or environmental standards, given the current climate of public opinion. So I think this is going to boil down to a negotiation about how you determine and describe what acceptable minimum standard should be on both sides, and what mechanism you have to resolve any dispute. So the EU will start by saying, well, we should measure it by where we are at any given time. What EU laws and treaties say is what should be taken as the standard. And the British side will say, well, now hang on, you could go and do something completely barking and impose restrictions on new technologies, artificial intelligence, use of big data to improve healthcare, GM technology, life sciences that are going to be really important in the 21st century. And we want to have the freedom to diverge from you, and it's not going to affect these standards that we all share a concern about. So that's where the debate's going to go, in my view.
David Starkey.
I think David has made what is the really important point. The way the EU is framing it at the moment, it's saying, effectively, you have to continue as though you were still a member of the EU. You've got to follow EU law, and moreover, the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, will still be the final body enforcing it. Now, that is not tolerable. Those of us who voted leave, Dreda and I, regulations. We wanted self-government.
Together for...
I know, embrace. Who'd have thought it? Who'd have thought it? I've always said it brings strange friends together. It's great.
He's not calling you strange, by the way.
I'm happy the friendship is strange, and I'm the strange one anyway. But the key thing is that we voted for this fundamentally British, English idea of self-government, that we are a sovereign country that has got its own laws. Now, there is a way of dealing with it that answers both sides of the problem. It's a recognition of equivalence. That is to say that you have a machinery which says our regulations in this area, they may be a bit different from yours, they may be slightly stronger, they may be slightly weaker, they may be phrased differently, but they're broadly equivalent. And until the EU are prepared for that, we will get nowhere. And my guess is we will finish up with some sort of machinery that allows for that.
Jason, what would you like to say in response?
Two very quick points, if I may. Firstly, it's quite shocking to hear two Leave voters saying how wonderful it was for Britain to be able to have much higher standards and rules and regulations than the European Union when we were setting our own rules as EU members. And a second one saying that our labour rights in the UK...
Could you repeat that? Because, excuse me, could you repeat what you've just said now? It was totally unintelligible. And as I think you're wanting us to answer a point, say something clearly and we'll do our best to answer it.
Certainly. Iain suggested that our standards are much higher on environment and climate and everything else than the European Union's, which would
I didn't necessarily say on environment and climate. I said there were many areas, and I would say animal welfare is certainly one. I would say workers' rights is certainly one.
Yeah. So we're setting our own rules and our own laws as we were EU members. And then, I'm sorry, I do forget your name. I do apologise.
Dreda.
Labour rights.
Dreda.
Thank you. The Labour Party were responsible for the labour rights in the United Kingdom while we were EU members, etc. And that was the first point. It's interesting to hear that we could make our own rules all the time. Secondly, in order for the next stage of the negotiation to follow through, after David Lidington was talking about the chest beating and the sound bites that are being thrown around, the next step is to put down your written, detailed, negotiating objectives, what you want out of this future trade relationship.
Which David Frost did in a speech kind of 2 days ago, and I think they're going to be publishing... I think they're going to be publishing a document next week.
Yes. Next week, the EU and the UK had agreed to publish those objectives, but the UK today, as announced on the BBC earlier, have cancelled the issuance and the publication of our objectives based on what was said today in London by the assistant to Michel Barnier. So the UK are now reneging on yet another promise, because as soon as you try and write Brexit down and put the detail down, it crumbles, it vanishes.
Well, let's get a response on that from David Lidington. Why do you think that they've done that? Just in response to Stefan Durant's speech?
First of all, I want to sort of hear an explanation. I'm sure this will come as soon as Parliament gets back next week, because there'll be an expectation of Parliament being given a report on it. I mean, it may be simply a sense that the negotiating in detail in public is rarely a very good idea, because it means you get a huge row as soon as anybody makes any sort of move away from their negotiating
But part of the problem
position.
in the Theresa May government, of which you were a leading member, the EU never really knew what your objectives were, because she seemed to be incapable of telling them.
Well, I know I would disagree with that. I think they knew at every stage what was going on and what it was that the UK government wanted to achieve. They disagreed at various stages with how we were seeking to accomplish those objectives. But I think that there will be a negotiation. There's only a relatively short space of time for the two parties to get down to the nitty-gritty on this. So I'm not going to get worked up about whether or not a particular report is published next week. The test will be whether we see the technical negotiators on the two sides going off, getting into interim, I hope without leaks to encourage you and your fellow journalists and broadcasters, because actually these things are best settled when people can test out ideas in the privacy of a negotiation between the two parties.
OK, well, thanks very much so far to David Starkey, David Lidington, Vicky Foxcroft and Dreda Say Mitchell. They'll be here until 9 answering more of your questions. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's coming up to 8:30 and Caroline Rundell has the news headlines.
The government's been warned by some business leaders plans for a new points-based immigration system will backfire. From next year, tighter restrictions on visas will require qualifications and the ability to speak English. Forecasters are predicting a month's worth of rain in the next 24 hours across northern England and Scotland. The Environment Agency has 6 severe flood warnings in place. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will officially no longer be considered senior royals after the end of next month. A statement says they'll also lose their office at Buckingham Palace. LBC weather, heavier rain working its way from the north of England into Wales, the Midlands and further south tonight. A low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC.
London's air pollution affects every borough and everyone's health, especially children. The main cause? Road transport. The Mayor and TfL are working to clean up London's buses and taxis, but there are things we can all do as well. By swapping just one car trip every week for walking, cycling or public transport, we can help make London's air cleaner together for everyone. See how the Mayor and TfL are working towards cleaner air. Sign up to do your bit and swap that trip at lbc.co.uk.
If you want to be big, you've got to think big. That's why at Big Motoring World, we're growing even bigger with a brand new car supermarket near Enfield. It's a big one with massive savings and a gazillion cars. Go big. Go Big Motoring World in Stratford, East London, in Kent, and now open in Enfield. See bigmotoringworld.co.uk.
Big Motoring World.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
We're Ola, the global ride-hailing app just launched in London. If you're a driver, we have 3 exciting plans to choose from. With the Ola Flex plan, you enjoy 0% commission until the 22nd of March 2020 and a £500 minimum weekly ride fare guarantee. Log on to oladrive.uk/drivers to get yourself Ola ready today. T's and C's apply. Drive the change. Ola.
The rules say you can't have a big 4x4 SUV that combines power with fuel efficiency. But the new Vauxhall Grandland X Hybrid 4 breaks all the rules. The smart petrol-electric hybrid engine combines 300 horsepower with up to 204 mpg. That's right, 204. Search Grandland X Hybrid and test drive now at your local Vauxhall retailer. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. Official WLTP Grandland X Hybrid 4 test figures. For comparison purposes only, obtained using combined battery power and fuel. Real-world figures may vary.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 8:33. If you'd like to watch us, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, the YouTube channel, Facebook feed or Twitter feed as well. Lots of you are doing so that's nice. We've got lots more questions to get through in the next half an hour with Dr. David Starkey, Sir David Lidington, Vicky Foxcroft and Dreda Say Mitchell, whose new book is here if you're watching. Trapdoor, is the dark past about to surface? I wonder which one of you has got the darkest past.
Oh, me.
Yes, I think we can all agree on that one. Right, before we get into trouble, Simon's in Sevenoaks. Hello, Simon.
Good evening, Iain. Good evening to the panel. I'd like to ask the panel, with Priti Patel, Home Secretary, outlining the government's revised post-Brexit immigration strategy, does it fulfil the manifesto commitment of taking back control and reducing immigration, or will it have the adverse effect?
Right, David Starkey.
The opposite effect, I think. We don't know. Quite simply, we do not know. is going to pull, I think, in two different directions. If they actually do what they say, then a great deal of the unskilled immigration that has been important for agriculture to an extent, but more particularly for service industries, you can call the caring and waiting table service industries, the people who have been recruited from Europe to do that will no longer be able to come. On the other hand, the points system, the priority for English, for superior educational qualifications, for professional qualifications, could well lead to increased immigration of skilled people. And of course, with the very open question whether we should actually be encouraging, say, doctors from India or Pakistan or Africa or whatever to come to Britain in any case. On the other hand, it is a gesture. And I think there's something else I would like to say, and it goes back to a point we've been making earlier on about social policy in Britain. I think it is really important to recognise that immigration did undercut lower wages. The scale of immigration since the late 1990s, brought in by the Blair government, did undercut lower wages. And what is striking, it is only since we quit the EU and since we started tightening up that wages have begun to move at that level, the lower level, and very much, as it were, helped by what I acknowledge was originally a Labour policy, the policy of the minimum wage, which I passionately approve of. I think that paying benefits to people in work is something which is deplorable. It amounts to subsidising employers. They're paying people too little.
So is that the reason why a lot of big business is so against this?
They want cheap labour.
Exactly right.
They want cheap labour. And unfortunately, for a long period of time, and this was especially true of the Blair government, there was an unholy relationship between the Mandelson "we're easy with people being filthy rich," the EU lobby and the big business lobby. They wanted cheap workers. I do not believe in cheap workers. I think it is demeaning, it is shocking, it is a strain on the public purse. And I mean, however clumsily Miss Patel may be doing it, she's saying the right things. We ought to make sure that we as a population can undertake a broad range of tasks from the most skilled to the least skilled. The area of productivity, the area of skilling is one of those where Britain is at its weakest. And I think the enormous floods of immigration have been a fundamental part of that.
Vicky Foxcroft, I imagine there's actually quite a lot of that you could find common cause with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with cheap labour. And before I was an MP, I was actually working for a trade union for quite a,
Which one?
10, 11 years. It finished as Unite, but I started with the AWEUs, the Engineers and Electricians Union. But what I'm particularly worried about in terms of this announcement is the impact in terms of social care. We already know we've got a shortage in terms of people working in the social care sector. People rely on it. It's we all know somebody who has somebody that needs that extra care and stuff. And where is the plan around that? And a lot of the funding in terms of the driving up the wages would be coming from central government, through to local government. So if we're going to do this and make sure we don't have a social care crisis or more of a social care crisis, then we have to make sure that our local authorities have gone and got that funding they so desperately need.
More common ground. I would agree
completely.
This is
marvellous.
No, I've got something that David said. So we both voted leave, but I did not vote leave around the whole issue of immigration. I need to make that really clear. And I have to take issue with just some of the language that you use. You talked about a flood of migrants coming here. That use of that term flood is just one of those real kind of words that migrants have had to live with. It's a derogatory word. My parents who came here, they came here in the 50s and the 60s. And this is one of the issues I think that's come up with this Priti Patel's immigration proposal around so-called unskilled workers. Because this term unskilled, I've got a problem about it. Why can't we all just be workers? they actually went to the Caribbean in the 50s and 60s, including Enoch Powell, to Barbados, because there was a need for workers here. And it just strikes me...
Well, let's not forget that Priti Patel's parents were part of the same generation as your parents.
Absolutely.
But they were
Ugandan. They were Ugandan. Yeah, but she had a hard time today, I think, on LBC, talking about would they have actually got in the country with her own, the things that she wants to do.
I would only just scrape in.
Well, exactly. So many people... would really. So in terms of unskilled, I forgot what I was going to say, but in terms of kind of, you jumped over
Sorry,
me.
I'll keep silent now.
No, but I agree with everything that you were saying in terms of, saying unskilled. Are our care workers unskilled?
Well, absolutely. But that's what I was going to say. With a Conservative government, what do the Conservatives always believe in? They believe in a free market, and the free market operates on demand and supply. So if you have demand and supply in terms of so-called unskilled workforce, and if companies here are now being told they have to employ British nationals, if they can't get enough of British nationals, well where is this workforce actually going to come from? So I think that they will have to change this policy, because it's not an economic policy. It's much more of a political policy, and it's not a realistic policy.
David Lidington, if you were still in government, would you be arguing for this policy to be at least tweaked?
Yeah, that puts it very well. I think that clearly there needed to be a policy to deal with the ending of automatic free movement of people from European Union member states. A points-based system is as good as any other. The Australian experience is that it actually led pro rata to an increase in immigration compared with the UK. So David Starkey may be completely right in saying that the net impact of this new policy may be to be more generous, not less.
But it would shift its focus.
It would shift the emphasis. Where I have concerns about the policy today is over the impact on particular sectors. I don't think it is unreasonable to say to industries like construction or horticulture that they need to shift towards greater use of technology. And you look at horticulture in the Netherlands, and they use technology, robots, automation to a far greater extent than our horticulturists do. I remember going last year up to South Yorkshire and seeing a pilot project with a robot bricklayer, and to a factory where they were doing prefabricated modern prefabricated housing, where you do, as many European countries do, you in effect assemble the different sections of a house or bungalow in the factory, and then you take them to the site and you put the building up much more quickly than under our traditional construction methods. But it will take time for those sectors to adjust. They can't do it in 10 months. So I worry about that. And I think Vicky made a reasonable point about social care. You can actually use modern technology a bit there. You can have you can to keep an
visit old people
no,
in their
not
homes.
to visit. No, but this is where you make the distinction. If you're checking that an elderly person with a frail memory has remembered to switch off the cooker, you can do that with
or take their medication,
or take their medication. But you can't bathe them, and you can't cook them a meal.
What about
have a person doing that? So you do the extra resource for that.
What about the fact that we have more or less full employment in this country at the moment, and so therefore, inevitably, in some sectors of the economy, they are going to need people that the British economy cannot provide them with, and those sectors are going to be thinking, okay, they've got 10 months to try and work it out, but actually that's not an awfully long time.
That is my worry. It's particular. It's not just particular sectors. It's particular parts of the country. If you go up to a pub in the Scottish Highlands, you're quite likely to be served by somebody, barman or waiter from Hungary or from Latvia, because you're seeing depopulation in the Highlands of Islands of Scotland at the moment. So it will not. You come to an area like the one I used to represent in the southeast of England, and unemployment is about 1.5%. So there isn't this great pool of unemployed labour to come forward. So I think that the government does need to think about the implementation of this policy in both geographical and sectoral terms.
We have a brilliant question next, but we do have to take a short break first. You're going to enjoy this one. It's not particularly newsy, it's more general, but that'll be enough of a tease to keep everyone listening, hopefully. With David Starkey, Vicky Foxcroft, David Lidington and Dreda Say Mitchell. It's coming up to 8:44.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. on LBC.
So 106 billion is being talked about now. Would 110 be too much? 150? 200? Is HS2 worth any price?
Well, of course it's not worth any price.
Well, how high is too high?
We're talking about. Well, I mean, I can't answer that question. Eddie.
You can.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
I'm Chris Riccobono, founder of Untuckit. I started Untuckit in 2011 because, like a lot of other guys, I just couldn't find a shirt that looked great untucked. It's a tough style to get right. Untuckit shirts were designed to be worn untucked. They have that just right length and more than 50 fits for tall, short, slim, and bigger guys of every age. Today, we have over 85 stores in America and Canada, and we have just opened in the UK. Visit us at Covent Garden in Westfield, London, or go to untuckit.com. Untuckit, shirts designed to be worn untucked.
Discover Ireland's wild Atlantic way with Aer Lingus. Fly London to the west of Ireland from $32.99 each way as part of a return trip. Enjoy breathtaking scenery, taste fresh seafood, and explore wild coastal walks. Smart enjoys a short break in Ireland. Smart flies Aer Lingus. Book now at airlingus.com. Offer subject to conditions and availability.
If you want to be big, you've got to think big. That's why at Big Motoring World, we're growing even bigger with a brand new car supermarket near Enfield. It's a big one with massive savings and a gazillion cars. Go big. Go Big Motoring World in Stratford, East London, in Kent, and now open in Enfield. See bigmotoringworld.co.uk.
Big Motoring World.
The government and the NHS are prepared to deal with coronavirus. You can help too. The best way to protect yourself and others is to wash your hands with soap and water or use a sanitizer gel regularly throughout the day. Catch your cough or sneeze in a tissue, bin it, and wash your hands. If you have recently arrived back from specified areas, follow the returning traveller advice. Check the list of areas and find out more at nhs.uk/coronavirus.
We're Ola, the global ride-hailing app just launched in London. If you're a driver, we have 3 exciting plans to choose from. With the Ola Flex Plan, you enjoy 0% commission until the 22nd of March 2020 and a £500 minimum weekly ride fare guarantee. Log on to oladrive.uk/drivers to get yourself Ola ready today. T's and C's apply. Drive the change. Ola.
This is the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry he wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time he hops on a bus. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings account.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
It's 8:47. If you've just tuned in, we're with Dr. David Starkey, Sir David Lidington, Vicky Foxcroft and Dreda Say Mitchell. Final plug for her book, Trapdoor. Is the dark past about to surface? I felt as if I should do an American accent then, but thank God I didn't. Let's go to Luke in Bromley. Hello, Luke.
Good evening, Ian. Good evening, panel and listeners.
Evening.
My question is, thank you for the tee up, it is simply, what must we do to make Britain great again?
Oh, I feel we should be playing Jerusalem now. David Starkey, you know your history better than most of us.
I think we should stop knocking it down. One of the great problems has, as you know, it goes back to George Orwell, is particularly a certain type of intellectual. I hate that word, though I suppose somebody might even call me one. Especially on the left.
You've been called worse.
I've been called so much worse, even on this programme, Ian, especially by you. But there's been a tradition of denigrating Britain, which I just find extraordinary. No French intellectual would feel obliged to denigrate France, but it is built in. I'm afraid, Vicky, we saw it very definitely in the previous leader of the Labour, the current leader of the Labour Party, the fact that, you know, the Salisbury poisoning, every single thing you look at, it is Britain to blame, it is the West to blame. And this, I think, undercuts, it leads to a kind of version of the Aussie cultural cringe. But
what?
Well, have you never heard of the cultural cringe?
No.
Which I mean, it's one of the things.
Is it something to do with Dame Edna?
Yes, it was. She was satirising with the wonderful slobbering chap with the gigantic
Sir Les
tie.
Patterson, who I have seen
She
live.
always slightly reminds me of you, dare I say?
I have no gladiator.
And I think that we need. But again, I would slightly. I slightly shrank when I heard the question, because we don't do Trump. Can you imagine even Boris getting up saying we're going to make Britain great again? The last time a politician did that, it was Gordon Brown, and it rang awkwardly in a really disagreeable fashion, because we have a rather quiet pride. We have a patriotism, we have a deep sense of rootedness, of cultural attachment, which has been astonishing in that it's embraced immigrant communities in a in what I think is a genuinely extraordinary way. And it's that I want us to see.
Did you not find that a bit condescending, the way you said you felt it embraced immigrant and looked at me? I was born in Plaistow.
I know you were. I know you were, but do you know? It's no. Please,
it just
please
felt
listen.
it just rang a bit patronising.
It was intended to be completely the opposite. Because, for example, if you go to France and you look at somebody of your roots in France,
what, Plaistow?
No. Be serious.
I am being serious, but this is the problem. You look at me as something as other.
No, I don't. On the contrary.
Yeah, but you said as look at somebody like me. What does that actually mean?
I was gently trying to say the opposite. I think that we have been almost unique in Europe. In fact, right, let's start boasting. We have been unique in Europe in the way in which a very diverse society is being created here, with of course heartache, trouble, problem, but on the whole, something rather wonderful emerging from it. You look in France at the problems they have with their North African communities, the profound degrees of dissent and hostility and violence. I think they're things to be very proud of. And do you know what it is? It's that we are not simply a nation and we're not a country. We're four. We've historically been English, we've been Scottish, we've been Irish, and we've been Welsh, and we've also been something else as well. Okay. We've been British, and these
and the Commonwealth,
and the Commonwealth,
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
these merging identities.
Yeah. So Britain to me is bigger than just. It is many things. It is many colours. It is many cultures. Many regions. Many generations. My big thing, I think, for Britain, I think about the young people, and what I would love is to live in a society where we didn't make everyone feel success is about becoming a millionaire. I would like to live in a society where we could give people just a job. All you need is four walls and a roof, some money for a holiday, some money for your kids, and to have a good time and to have time to spend with each other. That is as simple as life should be. If we aim for that for everybody, everyone would have a great time in Britain.
Vicky.
Iain, I agree with everything that Dreda said, but also kind of to your point about paddy power earlier, I think, obviously a Labour government, but actually
that's what would make Britain great again.
But a Labour government that would be led
History isn't on your side, I'm afraid.
Led by a female Labour leader, Lisa Nandy, who I think is fantastic. I think she inspires people. I think she makes you feel good about yourself when you listen to her. And I also know that David, in the past, when he was asked who worried him most in terms of the Labour Party and becoming leader, he went and said Lisa Nandy as well.
Absolutely.
David?
Yeah, I don't resile from that comment. I think we should start by saying Britain is already great, but don't think that you somehow fossilise your idea of Britain. It's a country that is always changing, always renewing itself. And I agree with what David Starkey said about the success of including, despite the difficulties and the tensions and problems, people, communities from different parts of the world as part of mainstream Britain.
I call it
And
biculturalism.
Well, I saw it in my own constituency, and people who happen to come from, new Commonwealth minority backgrounds, actually more recently from Polish and from Romanian backgrounds too, who are really proud of this country, of living here and of contributing to it. You talk to my kids' generation, and the sort of angst that perhaps there was there in my parents' or my time, race relations and so on, isn't there now. I won't say people are colourblind, but it really doesn't make any difference. It's just part of life. And if you look at what this country has, we have an amazing wealth in terms of culture and the arts, whether you look at music or film or television or writing at the moment, and it's British authors, musicians, producers who are on demand all around the world. And above all, I think this is a country where, despite Twitter, it is still on the whole the case that most people rub along fine with their neighbours, even if they disagree vehemently with them. And most people find it possible to happen to have a disagreement in the family or amongst friends without impugning people's integrity or turning that into some pitched battle where they cease to be on speaking terms. And that's a way of life we need to hold on to.
Well, Vicky, Lisa Nandy has a rival for Labour leader. Carlos in Devon says Dreda for Labour leader. Now, listen, we've got time for one more question and a quick text question at the end. Alan's in Brixton, but we've only got literally about 4 minutes, so 1 minute for each of you on this one, please. Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. Brilliant show as always. I would like the panel's opinion on this law that's been passed with no democratic discussion regarding the NHS staff that can refuse treatment if people are swearing. I understand one of your colleagues touched on this, but I just wondered what the panel thought about.
Okay, well, but it's not actually a new law, but the NHS have announced that from April, anybody who's racist, sexist, homophobic or violent towards NHS staff will not get treatment. So 1 minute from each of you. Vicky Foxcroft.
I think that if anybody's in a really serious situation, they need to go and get treatment. I don't know the details of all of that, but obviously nobody should be abusing NHS staff, and that has to be dealt with. And, if it's a criminal offence, then it needs to be dealt with criminally.
David Starkey?
Oh dear, what is the body count going to look like?
Well, I think they're not.
No,
they're saying for. No, I know you are, but they're saying for A&E patients, this would not apply. I mean, if you're sort of in danger of losing your life.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of.
But it's in a normal. I mean, if you're going to see a GP or something, or if you've just got a normal hospital appointment and you say something obnoxious in that way to a member of staff, they have the right to refuse you treatment. I did a phone in on this last night, and I had two doctors phone in. One originally from Pakistan, who said he was actually performing surgery on someone, and they said, I'm not going to be treated by a P. And he said, it absolutely drained me, and I felt that I couldn't continue with the operation, not because necessarily of what he said, it's just that it made my head go all wrong. What's your view on that?
That is abominable behaviour, but I suppose finally a professional should be able to cope. I think I would see it as a question of two things. There is a law that deals with that kind of behaviour, which could and should be used, but there is also a medical responsibility to care for the sick. And to turn it into the equivalent of abuse in the London Transport Ticket Office, I think begs far too many questions.
David?
I think that people who are abusive should not behave in that way, and I think staff should have the right to say, sorry, no, go off, cool down, and come back when you're prepared to speak to me politely, and then we'll get on with business. And I think that should apply not just in the NHS, but in all walks of life.
Dreda?
Yeah, because I think, I can't remember the statistics, but the abuse of NHS staff is astronomical. The abuse of staff who are from ethnic minority backgrounds is astronomical. If that was me, no, I'm not treating you, and no one could make me treat you. And actually, if we didn't treat you, you might mind your manners the next time.
There's part of me that would love to see you, so what your response would be. Right, Alan, thank you for that, and thanks for being so brief. Final text question from Lil in Abington. EastEnders is 35 this week. What vintage TV or radio show would you bring back? David Lidington.
You're always seduced by memories of childhood. So TV, it would probably be the Magic Roundabout that I always remember watching when I came home from school.
I could sing you the theme tune now, but I won't. Dreda.
I'll tell you what, it would be a comedy, The Rag Trade. Do you remember when Miriam Carlin?
Yeah.
And the reason I would bring it back is I think we've lost touch with our female comedians like Miriam Carlin, Hilda Baker.
She was brilliant.
Yeah, but we don't talk about them the way we talk about male comedians of the past. So let's bring back The Rag Trade, which was actually a programme about working class women, and it was about women.
Vicky.
I remember growing up and watching a bit of a do, and always
brilliant,
thinking
wasn't it?
that was good fun.
There was a wedding or a funeral each week, wasn't there? And it was all about how the different people interacted. You're absolutely right on that. What was the lead actress? Gwen somebody? I can't remember. Gwen Taylor, that's the one. And I think David Jason was in it, wasn't he, as well? I feel as though an EastEnders drum roll is needed now for David Starkey.
I would do the opposite. I starred in a very long-running, it's still on, though it shouldn't be, a radio programme called The Moral Maze. And I said the problem, especially on Radio 4, is the moment a programme should be abolished, it becomes a bloody national institution and lasts forever.
Well, of course, that does clash with this programme, so thanks for bringing that one up. Somebody did that the other week. Claire Fox did that the other week as well. I would bring back Mrs. Dale's Diary. Anyway, thank you all very much indeed. Don't forget, if you've missed Cross Question any week, it's available on the podcast and on the LBC YouTube channel. Thanks to Vicky Foxcroft, David Starkey, David Lidington and Dreda Say Mitchell. In a moment, we're going to be asking you what you think of the government's immigration proposal.